Hello, BookTube. I saw a video recently on Jim's channel, Jim's Books and Reading and Stuff. It was a charming video that he made with his grandchildren. I'll leave a link to it down below. And it's drawn on comments by Daniel Pennac about the rights of the reader. what rights do readers have? Pennac comes up with 10, a standard decalogue, and Jim goes through them. I thought I'd go through them too, and then because it's, as the kids say, on brand, I thought I would respond with the wrongs of readers, since who would know them better than I? But first we'll go through the rights of readers, because they're very, very good. Number one, the 10 inalienable rights of the reader. Number one is the right not to read. Not to feel like you're on some sort of a grind that you want to take time off from reading, go right ahead. Might seem inconceivable to me, but it can often be healthy for readers, I have heard. Number two is the right to skip. Which I guess, in the context of Pennac's comments, means to skip ahead, to skip around. Might also more broadly mean just to skip a book. But we're coming up to that in the next one, because the next right is the right not to finish a book, to DNF it, as BookTube lingo goes, to do not finish, did not finish the book. To say, I'm reading this, it's not doing anything for me, it doesn't show any prospects of doing anything for me, so I'm going to stop. In other words, the healthy kind of DNFing, which is to divest yourself of the attitude that is often drilled into students when they're in school, which is that a book is an obligation. And that no matter what's happening, whether you hate it or not, you have to finish it once you start it. There are way too many readers who leave school, become adults, and still think that way. And they shouldn't. I, of course, in my incendiary way, would argue that school children also shouldn't do that. They should simply say to their teacher, I gave this an honest try, and I don't want to read anymore of it. But of course, that's not going to happen. But that's definitely a right of a reader. And I worry, because I know readers that simply are still enchained to that old parochial attitude of, if I've started a book, I have to finish it. Not true. Right number 4 is the right to reread. Yes, indeed. Despite the offhand bashing that the whole process of rereading gets on Seinfeld, it is one of my favorite things to do. And obviously worthwhile. If a book has depth, it stands to reason, since the author labored over obsessively for months or even years, and you're not taking that time to read it, it stands to reason there'll be depths you will miss. And also you change. So, yeah, the inalienable right to reread. Number 5 is the right to read anything. Anything at all. Anything at all. There is no prescribed way here, so anything you want to read is fine. Number 6 is the right to mistake a book for real life. I thought this was kind of clever, kind of interesting. I think that the people who literally do this, the people who there are quite a few people on BookTube who simply lie about this reaction to books. But there are also quite a few people on BookTube who actually do bawl hot tears of agony down their face in sheets when a character dies in a book. And I myself think that that's a deeply, deeply unhealthy way to read, but some people love it. They absolutely love it. And you should definitely have the inalienable right to do that. Number 7 is the right to read anywhere. Anywhere at all. Jim's grandchildren really earned their keep playing around in this video. It's quite fun to watch. I'm not sure that I would definitely agree with this inalienable right. I agree with them all. I would tend to grouse about this one in the specific circumstance of young people who are reading on their phones while they're supposed to be watching where they're walking on the sidewalk. I've had a number of those young people simply walk right into me, and they don't look up from their phone. They don't apologize. They don't do anything of the kind. They're in another world, and I might appreciate that kind of transportation if it were taking place on their couch or in their bed, but when they bump into me on the street, it's a different thing. But still, yes, the right to read anywhere. Then right number 8 is the right to dip in. I agree with this. It's going to connect with the wrongs of being a reader, the wrongs of readers, but I definitely agree with this. I don't see the sense in it if it's a work of fiction that is supposed to be building to a climax and then a payoff. But there are certainly some works of nonfiction where that will work. It's certainly anthologies. Usually, it's perfectly okay to dip in and out. Then inalienable right number 9 apparently it's to sneeze inside of a video. In the last, I think it's 15 solid years, I have not sneezed ever off camera. But anyway, number 9 is the right to read aloud. I don't see anyone curtailing this right. Once upon a time, for a long time, for centuries, it was the only way people knew how to read, was to read out loud. But yeah, absolutely, the right to read out loud. It can often be fun, although it slows you down. You have to make your peace with that. Reading aloud or being read to aloud slows you down. It slows you down to the speed that your brain can speak words, which is not the speed your brain can read words. The speed your brain can read words is several times faster than that, so you just have to make your peace with that. And then right number 10 is the right to be silent. Naturally, since, as I've mentioned, I am 100% Irish Catholic, going back on both sides of my family to Noah's Ark. And since I'm also a critic and have been for a lot longer than a lot of you have been alive, being silent about a book seems weird. But of course, it's your right to do. You don't have to. It's not a performance. Like the first thing was, it's not a performance. You don't have to render a verdict on every book you read. Why you wouldn't want to, I don't know. That's half the fun, but that might just be me. But those are the inalienable rights of the reader. And I thought the very least they needed was 10 inalienable wrongs of the reader, because readers are not just sinned against little lambs huddling against a cold north wind. They commit plenty of wrongs on their own. So let's go through a quick a decalogue of the inalienable wrongs of a reader. Wrong number 1 is the wrong of pretension. And that is fetishizing a book as a kind of exquisite thing. I remember once, years and years ago, Deb and I were at my information desk at the old bookstore. A woman came in, wanted a recommendation. Before we can even open our mouth, she started opining like she was on a stage in a bad production of Hamlet at the air. She was no longer talking to us. And she held up a hand like she was declaiming, like she was John Wilkes Booth on the 19th century stage. Held up a hand and said, "Ah, Dickens." And instantly, Deb and I both knew this person never reads. That kind of pretension, the ostentatiously exquisite volumes that are very much never read, but that are there to sort of add to your airs and graces as to the cultural cachet of reading. I do not understand this at all. I've never understood the people who think this way. One time I was at a party years ago. It wasn't a literary party, not explicitly. It was a lot of smart young people and some smart older people. And it was one of those, it was in a loft in New York City. So it was, conversations were moving from room to room. People were moving all around. And at one point, a woman sidled up to me. She had to be then in her early 30s. And she asked me, "What are your passions?" And I said, "Well, I'm passionate about reading." And her eyebrows shot up. And she said, "Ooh, I had best be careful with my grammar," which I've heard a lot in my life. That's typically the response you get from non-readers is, "I'd better watch my grammar." And then the party sort of milled her away. And every time it milled her back to me for the entire course of the evening, every time she came back to me, she assumed what she thought was a stilted, upper-class, posh English accent. Only to me. I listened. She wasn't talking that way to anyone else in the loft, just to me. That is someone who just automatically associates books with pretension. So number 1 wrong of the reader is the wrong of pretension. Number 2, the second wrong of the reader is the wrong of lying. And this connects with the inalienable right to skip and to DNF up in the decalogue of the rights of the reader. You definitely have the right to skip in a book and to sample a book and also to DNF a book. But you don't have the right. It is an inalienable wrong of a reader to then lie about that and say that you read the book. You did not read the book. Reading the book is reading the book and nothing else. And the same thing is true in part and parcel. Lying also, the wrong of lying also applies to lying about the factual content of a book. Which you won't see readers do so much. That's a little bit more of a dig at my own profession, where some reviewers will actually lie about the content of a book. But mainly the lying I'm talking about here is claiming a notch that you don't have. Then inalienable wrong of the reader, number 3, is the wrong of equating obscurity with profundity or worth. We see this all the time with hipster BroTube people, with people who you mention, if you mention George Orwell, Anthony Burgess, Christopher Hitchens, one of the men that they read, they will or they will inevitably cite some work they know virtually no one knows that person wrote, and say, yeah, that was the pinnacle of his genius. In the last century, the last half of the century, you got that a lot with reader bros who would cite Tolstoy's novel Resurrection. I was, again, at another, this time an explicitly literary party, where someone said, oh, indisputably his best work. Yeah, thanks there, Smedley. And the number one go-to example of this in the 21st century, at least as far as my own experience goes, is the 80 million, roughly 80 million dude bros who have recommended to me Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson. So they've seen me take to task his ridiculous self-help books, and they've told me, well, his self-help books would make a lot more sense to you, and you would get a lot more out of their ipseity if you read Maps of Meaning and really understood it. That is an inalienable wrong of a reader, to go for obscurity. There's this little known half-finished piece of juvenilia that D.H. Lawrence or Anthony Burgess wrote when they were 13. And you really should read that if you want the key to the later 70 years and 700,000 words they wrote. Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. And wrong number 4 is the wrong of equating antiquity with profundity, which I get a lot, again. And it happens in all realms of life, but really, because we're talking about antiquity, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the ancient Spartans, especially the ancient Stoics, But before, BroTube arose, mistaking antiquity for profundity could be found for 1700 years among Christians. And usually the form it takes has to be literary, because you're talking about literary remains. You're talking about books. And that is a fundamental wrong of a reader, because the ancients were stupid in exactly the same proportion as the moderns are stupid. Just because something is old and dusty, it's the Dan Brown Da Vinci Code way of thinking about the ancient world. That there must be some ancient wisdom in these old, crackly, dusty texts. As if those texts were never new. As if their author never cussed out a kitchen slave. It's absurd. It is a wrong of reader. It's particularly naive when it's done by people who are otherwise readers in their life. The ancients didn't have any wisdom with a capital W. My own argument would be that in life there is no such thing as wisdom with a capital W, no such thing as T with a capital T, truth with a capital T, and especially no such thing as meaning with a capital M. But that's a different video. At least I want to pinpoint here the inalienable wrong of the readers who think that you gain meaning with a capital M, truth with a capital T, the further back in time you go. Ridiculous. Then inalienable wrong number 5 of the reader is policing. This has always been true, but of course, like all things, like all bad things, it has been emphasized by social media in the 21st century. And that is this reader is wrong if they go to an acquaintance house for a housewarming party or a bar mitzvah or whatever, and they cannot resist the urge to offer an editorial comment on the J.K. Rowling books up on the shelf. They cannot stay silent on that subject. It is necessary, even though I'm your guest and I hardly know you, that I give you a tiny bit of a lecture about having those books on your shelves, that I police you just a bit. And of course, it gets much worse than that. That is, it's totally obnoxious. My own response would be, you know where the door is. But that at least is mild compared to iterations of it that we see. Again, well, you can use J.K. Rowling as a convenient lightning rod here. There are people in the book world. Keep in mind, Jason Harrigan, once upon a time, blessed be his name, when he had a BookTube channel, said that readers are by and large the best people. And I agree with him. But there are people in the book world, and on BookTube, and in our little corner of BookTube, who, if you handed them a switch and said, if you throw the switch, J.K. Rowling instantly dies, they would do it. There are people who would do that, whose channels you subscribe to and watch. because she holds a different political opinion than the one they hold in 2021. That is the ultimate form of policing, of course. And that is a tremendous fundamental wrong of readers. Then fundamental wrong number 6 is the wrong of calling a Facebook page fiction. This connects with my well-known disdain and hatred for autofiction. Just because it's been given an MFA-sanctioned name in the 21st century doesn't mean it's not fraudulent and lazy. If you can take someone's so-called novel and map it one-to-one right down to the dialogue onto their Facebook page or their Twitter feed, then it is not fiction. Then it is not fiction. If you can go to someone's Facebook page and the Facebook pages of their friends and see not only the line of dialogue unchanged from the book that you just read, but also sub-comments on that line of dialogue saying you should put this in a book, and the author of the book leaving a comment saying it's too good to waste, I'll certainly put it in the book. Well, then you have not only a one-to-one correspondence between the Facebook feed, but you also have the author admitting that they wrote no fiction. If that is a fundamental wrong, not the doing of it. You can do it all you like. The cynicism of it is the wrong of it. Because you do that and then you don't call it autobiography, because you know autobiography doesn't sell and fiction does to pretentious ponces like you. So instead you call it fiction, just an explicit lie. There is no fiction in it. It's demonstrably factual. So that is another fundamental wrong of readers. Then we'll go on to an inalienable wrong number 7, which is the wrong of snobbery. This one hits probably the closest home to me. It's the one I hate the most. And it is, as I've mentioned on this channel in a few videos, the totally mistaken opinion that there is a hierarchy of art forms. There is not. And just as there is no hierarchy of art forms, there is also no hierarchy of literature. It is not true. That is not true. The only thing that makes a hierarchy is merit. That's all. It's not that biography is inherently a better, more sophisticated, more real, more adult genre than romance. It's not that romance is inherently better than category romance. It's not that the latest crypto fiction from Danilewski or whoever is inherently, just by the nature of what it is, better than the latest book in a YA series. That is not true. There is no hierarchy along those lines. And the people who believe there is and stick to it and define themselves by it are book snobs, and they drive me nuts. They always have driven me nuts. Then inalienable wrong number 8 is the wrong of color organizing books. You'll often see this, especially in the background of really big booktubers. To me, it is, and that is, well, if I should describe it for those of you who had the luck never to have your eyes seared with the look of it, that is where you rearrange all of your books so that all the red books are together, all the green books are together, all the blue books are together, and not only that, but that you sit and carefully organize them so that the red books shade into the next color. So you've got some books in the middle there that are partially red or lighter red, shading towards either orange or blue. There are people, you can see these backgrounds all over the place. On Bookstagram, you can hardly look at Bookstagram without seeing them. And it's an inalienable error, a wrong of a reader, because what could more loudly trumpet the fact that you don't care what's in your books? What could more loudly trumpet than that? What could more loudly announce that the books on your shelves are displays to impress others, not anything you take seriously yourself? So, an inalienable wrong. And then inalienable wrong number 9 is the wrong of Twitter reading. I'm going to need to expound on this at length in some other video because it's way too big a subject for this little video. But I think you probably know what I mean. It's Twitter will cancel an author. Twitter will raise up an author. Twitter will explicitly say to you that every single one of the current political opinions that you hold, you should be able to find in the books that you read. And if the books that you read not only don't reflect them, but also don't explicitly say them, then those books are probably not a good look. Read the room. Yikes. I don't find this funny at all, etc., etc. That sort of thing. That sort of Twitter reading where everything in the universe, everything impossible to conceive anywhere is politicized along racial grounds or identitarian grounds. Everything, where everything is that way, most especially including the books that you read and the books that you talk about. That is, of course, noxious. That is a very much inalienable wrong of readers. And then the final wrong is the wrong of reading non-Steve sanctioned books. Okay? In my life, I have reviewed many thousands of books. I've written publicly about many, many thousands of books. And you have Google. It's a great search engine. You type in my name, first and last, and then whatever you're looking for, the book, the subject, the author, you will find a lot. On virtually, if you're reading in mainstream genres published by mainstream houses in America in the last 35 years, or classics going back to antiquity, chances are very good that I have read and opined on your book. And the reason why you want to check to see whether or not a book you're thinking about reading is Steve sanctioned connects with another nostrum that I say on this channel all the time, which is that in about 10 minutes, you're going to be dead, which means you have virtually no reading time left. You want to squander it on a book that I have already pronounced meh or even bad? I don't think you want to do that. So that is the 10th inalienable wrong of readers, is to read a book that Steve doesn't sanction. And there you go. Those are the inalienable wrongs of the reader to go along with the inalienable rights of the reader. And I will leave a link to Jim's channel so you can see what you think about all of these things. And I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.